And I forgot to tell you guys, because some of you probably are wondering, did Wayne ask for on Senior Sunday for the lights to be in this techno rave on and off situation? No, Wayne did not do that. He thought about it, but he did not. Monday evening, I came into the church and found the lights doing the same. So we suppose that after the storm went through on Monday, it's been doing this all week, and we have the calls in. It'll probably be 2 more weeks, though. So you might have to just deal with it. Lights coming on and off. It's technology. It is what it is. And so we got the lighting people coming. They just couldn't get here quick enough for us. And so Wayne did not ask for the techno rave going on all the lights. Today is really a really different day for me, and it's a really different day for the life of our church. And so being that today is what it is that later on this evening this church will vote on their pastor, I decided to do something a little bit different. Normally, if there was a pastor to be at a call, he would have been brought in this weekend. He would have had meetings with the deacons and personnel and a lot of different groups and meetings, probably like a fun thing last night to everybody meet him. And then he would have preached a great sermon this morning. And then this evening you would come, just like you will to this evening, for a question and answer time. And then at 6 o'clock the church would vote. And so that's kind of how the process is. Well, as I thought about this process and really kind of what I wanted to do with this process was that I've figured for the last 7-8 months, I don't know how long I've been filling the pulpit, you guys have probably heard my best and heard my worst. Like it or not, that's what it was. And so this morning, I really wanted it to take just a little bit of time and to be able to share with you my heart, my thoughts, my vision. Today, that everybody will get to make a vote, and whatever you do, that's your vote. That's your right. That's how we do church. But I want you to hear it from me. I don't want you to hear it from text messages or Facebook. I don't want you to hear it from your friends or from wherever you go. I want you to hear it from me. And then after me, you can make your decisions. And the whole reality is this is a little bit different, because if the committee was to bring someone who wasn't on staff already, he would come in and just be able to preach and just to love on you guys and to tell you some generalities of where he thinks that the church needs to go. But being employed here, living in Webb City for almost 2 years now, I have a little bit more insight. And so some of you this week called me and we had meetings and you asked a little bit about this insight, and we were able to meet and share my heart and my thoughts. But for the most part, many of you are just going to say, hey, I know Sean, and that's good enough for your vote. And that's okay. But I wanted to be able to tell the most people at the biggest time, which is on Sunday morning, this is my thoughts. This is my heart. And so I have, unlike myself, I have lots of notes, and you'll see me kind of look down a little bit. I just want to keep on track and get through this pretty quick. The reality is that this morning, this is a little bit different in that the committee has told us that all their top 3 candidates, they were all in their 30s. They all said much the same thing like about me, about ministries and staffing. Probably being their age, they're going to dress a lot like me. And so really this comes down to a theological, ideological, how we method. What is church really about? And that's really what today is about. What is this thing? What is this vote really about? And so I wrote down some things and I said this. I've employed as the youth pastor from October 1st of the year 2014. From that day forward, I've been the youth pastor. Ever since the moment that Joe left, it was made clear, and we knew, Ron and myself, we knew that we were not the senior pastor fill-in. I was the youth pastor, Ron was the adult and CR pastor, and that's what we did. But as time goes on, much like anything, when you have a machine and it's working and you take out one part, there's a lot of parts that don't fit right. And so people have to do other things to fill in those parts. And so from the day that Joe Fowler left, our last pastor, I've made cognitive and a hard, intentional decision to remain the student pastor. Now, I want you to hear this. I've made a hard intent to stay the student pastor. I have done everything with the students. Nothing has changed. We got in one night, like 2 o'clock in the morning from Six Flags, and I was preaching here that next morning. But through this, as being the student pastor, I was also asked to fill the pulpit. Of course, there were people in hospitals and nursing homes not getting visited. We jumped in. Me and Ron and I took care of that. I've performed weddings and funerals and baptisms since his absence. I helped give vision to the Easter season and the community outreach. I led in a prayer and anointing service for the deacons for a member of our church. I helped fill in and go into all the community and ministerial meetings that were all around this city that FBC needed to be represented in. I followed up with most of all the visitors and met with people that were interested about our church and membership and had questions about conversion and baptism. People would come in the office or they would make appointments and we would counsel with people. But the reality is I did all of that as the youth pastor. See, never once in my heart did I come in and try to fill that role. It was not my role to fill. That is the role of the church and for God to fill. And so with this, I do know that many people might come to the conclusion and say, you know, maybe Sean hasn't been a great senior pastor in the last 7 months. And I would agree. I haven't been the senior pastor. I haven't gone to senior adult meetings because I never have in the last 2 years. I haven't gone to visit all the old people because that's not what the youth pastor does. I've worked with the students and with the kids and with their families. And there's only so much a person can do. And in this, the point of me saying all this is that I tried to keep the playing field as level as possible. And by that, I mean this, that because I purposely did not step into that senior pastor role and try to fill in, to try to be that interim senior pastor, that provided a level playing field not only for myself, but for all the candidates and even the pastor search committee themselves. I myself never, ever put in a resume or an application to fill this role. The committee came to me. And so with this, I did not want to step in a role and to try to be political or look like I was manipulating and filling a role that was not mine. And in that case, that would mean that, therefore, I haven't been the senior pastor for 7 months. I was the youth guy. I was Sean, trying to do everything I possibly could to help the church above and beyond what I possibly could do as a youth pastor. And so with all this being said, there's a couple of things that I want to say, and then we're going to get into the vision. And this is not going to be a long day today. But there's a couple of things, because I've been here for almost 2 years, there's a couple of things that I want to say. Because I haven't been the senior pastor, I understand that if the church votes and God moves that way for me to be the next senior pastor, I know and I understand, and I've talked a great deal with the committee, that a senior pastor is different than a youth pastor. I know this. I absolutely know this. I know that a senior pastor can no longer hang out with all the students all the time. A senior pastor must be a pastor to everyone in the church, but more importantly and effectively to the adults and the senior adults. Because with students, they have their own pastor. With kids, they will hopefully have their own pastor. But then we're left with the majority of the church without their own dedicated pastor. And as a senior pastor, that's where he steps in and fills the role. He steps in with parents to help them from the very beginning of just being married until the grave. That's what a senior pastor does. And I completely know that. I also realize and know that a senior pastor is held to a higher standard of the church and of our community than a youth pastor. I completely understand that. This is not my first time in church. I've been on staff for 16, 17 years now, full-time. I understand this, that when somebody comes up and says, hey, this is my senior pastor of my church, they expect and want what that person looks like. I understand that. I want the exact same thing. If you were to say, hey, this is Sean, he's our youth pastor, your expectations, being right or wrong, are less than that of your senior pastor. You don't care if he has spiky hair and his shirt's untucked. You don't care. He's the youth guy. He's a goofball. You don't care. And it's funny. I mean, that's just part of it. That's who we are, right? That's just who we are. That's what we do. We all have these expectations. And I understand those expectations are different. And yes, I even realize that the expectations of dress code are a little bit different for the senior pastor. Now, I will say this. If your traditions require you that the senior pastor wears a suit, I'm not your guy. It never will be. I'll do things when the occasion is right for weddings and funerals, and many of you have been here when I've done this. But the reality is that's not where I'm at, and that's not where our community's at. The last funeral I did in this church, there was literally about 400-some people here, and the family yelled at me because I was overdressed. You guys never yelled at me for that, have you? And really, the reality, they told me to dress down, and I wore a khaki and a shirt much like this, untucked. And I was overdressed for a family in our community where I preached a funeral of 400 people. That's our community. That's who we are. And so I realize the expectations are a little bit different. Another thing that I want to address is that probably I think the committee and myself, we spent the most kind of time on was this, that if you were to ask me, hey, Sean, you've been here for almost 2 years, what is the biggest problem that we have at First Baptist Church? If we were to poll the audience, we all wouldn't land on this, but I guarantee you a majority would. And I would say as a pastor, if you're visiting today, hey, you get to see us for who we really are. I would say our biggest problem in this church is corporate worship. Is that our preferences of either young and old, which is not always the case. Old people like what young people like, and some young people like what older people like. But it's the preferences of worship. And so we spent a great deal of time with the committee, and I'm sure they did with all the other candidates, about how would I, as a pastor, possibly lead the church to come to a point together on really, if we were to really honestly sit down and look at each other, we would say, it's our biggest contention. It's not a problem, but it's a thing in which our church is divided on. How would I do that? And so some things that I would do with that is, I mentioned some town hall meetings. I think that we as a church have come to a point, we've walked down this road long enough, you guys have walked down it way longer than I have, I've only been here for 2 years, where we honestly need to have a come to Jesus moment. And what that means is a nice meeting where it's structured and we set up, but people can hear each other's calls. Why do some people want to sing out of the hymns that we just did today, but yet other people do not? Well, why do some people want the full band of hearing something that literally came on the radio a week ago on K-Love, but some people do not? See, the reality is we're never really going to come together and say we all like one music type. That's why when you turn on your radio, there's not one radio station. There's a bunch because everybody has a difference. If you were to say you like country music, I would say, do you like traditional country music? Do you like country western? Do you like cowboy country? Or do you like modern country? There's 50 different versions of what country music is. But the point of it is when it comes to worship, to be able to talk and to hear somebody, to be able to hear somebody's point. And the reality is to come to the point, the place where somebody as young as myself who would prefer something that I hear on K-Love, that I listen to in my car every time, I prefer that. That's easier for me to worship because I know the words. I know the melodies. I know the structural pattern of that song. But on the very opposite side, some of you'd say, that's exactly what we're saying about our songs. And the point is that we're never going to come together. But the point is that the young could see the old and say, we need to do what you can to worship. And the young have to look at the old and say, we need to allow what you guys can do to worship. And so through town meeting halls and through teachings as a pastor on truly what worship is, because in the Bible it never dictates on really the music. We see that instruments were used. We saw that David danced naked in the street. I'm not going for the naked church, okay? We're not going there. But the reality is the Scripture really never comes down, so it's really up to the church body. And at the end of the day, we as a church need to come together and we need to decide. In a Baptist church, we would say this: we need to vote. We need to say we're going to be a church that does this. In my 2 years here, I've worked with Tracy, I've worked with Ashley, and through many times, many people have praised them, many people have criticized them for their song choices, but the reality is, the church has never given them a direction. We all criticize or we all praise, but as a one body, we've never come together and says, this is what's best for the kingdom of God. This is what's best to reach God's mission, His goal. And those are the types of things that I want to walk through. I want to help. And many of you, I've talked to some of you. I remember maybe a month or two ago before vacation, Wayne came in my office and we were talking about today. And I just asked him, hey, do you agree that this is the biggest issue? He said, absolutely. And so we talked a great deal about it. And I won't tell you where he came down on it. He can tell you that. But the reality is we all know this. And if we're First Baptist going forward, how do we go forward? And so moving now more into the vision of really how are we going to go forward? What is First Baptist going to look like in the next 1, 2, 3 years? Not 5, 10. Let's just talk about the next couple years. And in this, probably one of the best things that I told the committee that I think we could do was to publish a huge questionnaire. And this questionnaire would ask questions and preferences from music to small groups to all the ministries, to kids ministry, to student ministry, to what our facilities look like, what our small group Sunday school looks like. And to really, it would be a long questionnaire that would probably take many of you weeks to fill out just because you'd want to think about it, process it, then turn that back in and let us report back to you. And I know this has been done before, but a report was never made. I will assure you a report will be made because I think it's good where we can all see what everybody's thinking across the board. All these are anonymous answers, and this is where our church is at. Here's the far left, here's the far right, here's the center. Where are we at on some key issues of things like this? And so with that questionnaire and with that vision, with all of our answers, hopefully we can start to move forward in our direction. And so some of these I talked with the committee with, some of them I have not. As I've been thinking this week about what today was going to be like, I kind of wanted to share just really a couple things with you, and it will help paint the picture of what's going on. And I'll say this, a church's vision, and I know in the last couple of years too, we've had a vision statement. I'm not talking about a sentence that we memorize. A vision is far much greater, far much bigger than that. A vision is bigger than any pastor and any staff, any committee. A vision is something where a church gets together, agrees, and they see a picture. And they see it completely. Just think of a picture. You guys ever did like paint by numbers? Kind of, Laura did one of those and it was amazing. Even I'm just not artistic, I couldn't do that. And she did this huge like sailboat, like this historic sailboat, and it has like the water. And even like the water, if I was painting, I would just paint it all blue. But literally there's like 80 colors of blue in the ocean. And when she got done, I was like, that is literally, if I wouldn't tell anybody, I would say, I bought this at an art market or something. You know, I mean, it was just amazing looking, but it was a paint by numbers. I still don't have the talent for it. But when you looked at that picture of that sailboat on the ocean, and in the ocean you had all these like places where these 80 different colors of blues are going to go, you could tell it was a ship, but you really didn't see really how good that picture was going to be. But as Laura started to paint, and she would number 1 blue, and she would go through, you would start to see some spots, and you're kind of like, I thought this was a boat, not a Dalmatian. And, she would say, hey, just wait. And then number 2 blue. And she would go through the 80 million different colors of blue. And when she got done, the ocean looked amazing. It was stinking awesome. But then everything above the ocean, the sky, the ship, the seagull, I don't know if there was a pirate on the ship. I'm going to say there was. There probably wasn't because it was a nice picture. But it was still all black and white. It was just a bunch of lines with numbers. But as she kept painting, I started to see that picture. I started to see, it wasn't just a brown boat. It was a multiple color brown because the rays of the sun. And all these details started coming out. And when she was done, it was amazing. And I think we framed it. And I'm going to say it's not hanging in our house now. I don't know what happened to it, but it was good. But you just kind of have that picture. That's what a vision is. It doesn't matter if you start with number 1 or number 5 blue. It doesn't matter what goes on. It doesn't matter if a pastor leaves. It doesn't matter if a committee rotates off. It doesn't matter if somebody gets mad and leaves. It doesn't matter if 50,000 people join the church. The reality is the church has saw this picture and they said, we can see it. Now we want to start filling it in. And at the end, through all this process, hopefully we get to see that beautiful, painted, detailed picture. God's given every church the mission, okay? He says what? To go and make disciples. That's the mission of every church. But I feel that church gives individual churches individual visions and missions on how they're going to reach that goal. If we were to ask everyone in this church today, how is First Baptist Church going to reach Webb City and to make Webb City, every person in Webb City, a disciple of Christ? How many ever people we have here today? That's how many people, different answers we would have. But as a church, we would come together and we would start to paint those pictures. Here's some of the things that I painted with. Before you start painting that picture of vision, we've got to learn who we are. Who is FBC right now? And you can see there I put a lot of stats and statistics, and you can read those. Maybe some are new, some are old to you. But who are we? Right now, 64% of all of our adults are 61 years and older. We have 14 families that are under the age of 50. We've had 9 baptisms in 2016 this far. We have an average of 231 in worship attendance. We have less than 20% of that 231 in PM service. And we have less than 35% of that on our Wednesday night activities. For if it's good or if it's bad, it doesn't matter. These are accurate numbers of saying who we are. What are we doing right now? You can see there 44 churches, Baptist churches in the Spring River Association in 2015. In 2015, and I had to write this down because I wanted everybody to know because you guys are smarter than me and I wouldn't. So I wrote this down. Spring River Baptist Associations, all the Baptists in our areas, makes up from these cities: Asbury, Carl Junction, Carterville, Carthage, Diamond, Dunawig, Jasper, Joplin, Neosho, Oronogo. Is that what is it? Oronogo. Look, I was there 2 years, I still can't pronounce it. I just want to say orange. That's every time I see it, I just see orange. Purcell, Reeds, Saginaw, Sarcoxy, Seneca, and Webb City. 44 Baptist churches in all of that area. We would all agree that's a pretty, I don't even know where half of those are at, but that's a pretty big area. 2014, there was 47 churches. In 2015, three churches closed their doors. They couldn't make it anymore. But out of those 44 churches, we are the 7th largest Baptist church. Maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't. We're the 4th largest in small group attendance. That's what we call, if I say small group, I'm talking Sunday school. It's the same word to me. We're the 5th largest in VBS enrollment, and we're the 9th in baptisms with 12 baptisms for the year 2015. If that's good or if that's bad, it doesn't matter. That's just who we are. That's literally looking and say. Now, if you were to go through and process, we're the 7th Baptist. Who's the largest? What are they doing? Who's the smallest? What are they doing? You know, I would say that we're 4th the largest in small groups attendance. I think that's amazing. That literally, guys, that's amazing. The number 1 church has 1,800 people on a Sunday morning. We're 4th. We're 7th, but 4th. We have more people that go to Sunday school than 3 other churches that are bigger than us. That's something that we are great at. 5th largest in VBS. I thought that was pretty outstanding. And 9th in baptisms. Personally, I don't count that as very good, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But that's who we are. But not only do we have to know who we are, we have to know who we're ministering to. Sorry, my phone just kind of kaput. Carrie, can you go to the next one? My phone just did something crazy. Thank you so much. Next one. Sorry, next slide. Carrie's doing a great job. I told her not to worry about it. It was my fault. Who is Webb City right now? If you were to take and from this church, draw a 1-mile radius circle, a 3-mile, and a 5-mile. That's how people do this. This is all information from a friend of mine who works at the North American Mission Board. Gave us a huge report of everything that we are. And everything they do is by 1 mile, 3 mile, and 5 mile. But if you look at the 1-mile radius, 1 mile from this church, total population is almost 7,000 people. There's 2,700 households. The median income is $34,000. Does that surprise anybody? It did me. Households with food stamps, 18% of our community within 1 mile. Households with disability or government assistance is 32%. And then if you go and you look at 3 mile and 5 mile, of course those get bigger, and you can go. But really, one of the biggest things for me was look at that household with food stamps and households with disability and assistance. Do you see it goes down as you get away from our church? We have 18%. You go 3 miles out, it's 15%. 5 miles, it's 15%. What does that tell us? Look at the median income. If you move within a mile away from this church, you could make $6,000 more. Those people do on a median. What does that tell us about who we're ministering to? Who is our community? And what we have to do is to see who we are. That's what we did in the last slide. What Webb City is, who we're ministering to, and then from that, how do we reach our community? In every study across the board done, from Southern Baptist Convention, from Lifeway, from Tom Rainer, from anybody who does any study on the church, they'll say this: a growing, healthy church always looks like its community. A growing, healthy church always looks like its community. So the question is, does First Baptist look like its community? You can see on the far left, you can see there, I broke it down into age ranges. There's a lot of different things that we could do. We could do pay and all that stuff, but this is the easiest. And you can see the yellow, the 3 at the yellow, we're over. You can see the FBC, that's who we are. But if you look at around us, who's around us? 20 and under, we have 25% of our church is 20 and under in this church. But around us is 30, 29%. And you go on. And the point of this is saying, and I want you to hear me this, is to say this: it's not that we have to get rid of that yellow column. It's not that we're saying we're getting rid of the 61 to 80. That's fantastic. We're over average on those. That's amazing. Somehow we've done something right where those senior adults are feeling ministered to and they want to be here. But what we do have to do is we have to, in order to look more like our community, we have to work on the 20 and under, on the kids, on the young adults, on the young families. And so does FBC look like our community? And I would say, not right now. But hopefully we can with God's help. So what does all this mean? How is FBC going to look like Webb City? And I put out 5 things. And the reality is if you think about it, it might seem far away, but those of you who know me know I think this way. I would say this: if I was coming in, I was a pastor, of course church votes on this and this is what they want, but I would say these are the 5 things that I would say First Baptist needs to grapple and to deal with before 2020. You're like, man, 2020? Hey guys, it's only 3 years away. It's not that long. 2020. The first thing that we need to do is we need to say this: baptisms at 10%. Whatever we are in attendance, let's baptize 10% of it. So right now we average 231 for the last 5 months. That I would say that this year we need to have 23 baptisms. So far we're at 9. Last year we had 12. The year before that we had 16. The year before that we had 16. The year before that we had 17. If you go back and look at all the paperwork, I can show you that less than 40% of all the people we baptize are with us a year later. We baptize people, only 40% are with us 1 year later. Why is that? What happens? Somebody gets baptized, they see Jesus, they feel Jesus calling. We as a church love them and we baptize them, we do what's biblical. Where do they go? What happens? Well, I would say the number part of that too is, we're going to express this in the next couple ones. Baptisms, 10%. I will say that there is no church in our association, those 44 churches, that baptize 10% a year. There's not one church. It doesn't matter if that church is running 15, there's a couple churches in the teens, or if that church is running 1,800. No church baptizes 10%. That's a large goal for any church. Are we willing to do it? In the last 3 years, besides this year, we've baptized 2 kids this year. In the last 3 years, we baptized 4 kids a year. 4 kids. Statistics tell us that 98% of people who come to know Jesus Christ are under the ages of 18 and under. We baptized 4. So we baptize a lot more adults than kids. That, once again, that's almost unheard of in most Baptist churches. Somehow we're doing something that's right. But 4 kids last year, 230 people spent 52 weeks to evangelize to 4 kids. Me as a pastor, this was eye-opening to me. This shamed me personally. That literally, we tell kids about Jesus once a quarter to a point of where they understand and know who Jesus is. Man, we can do better than that. We have the 5th largest VBS all around. We have hundreds of kids here in 1 week. I can say last year, none of those kids from VBS were baptized. Yes, we planted seeds. We did all that God can do. I completely understand that. But where's our heart? Where's our vision? When's the last time you evangelized somebody? When's the last time you asked somebody if they were baptized and what baptism was all about? And I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to myself just the same. Number 2 thing that we need to do, Acts 1:8 missions, strategy. We all know this, but if you don't, let me read you Acts 1, Acts 1, it says this: "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all of Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." I find it very disheartening. I've sat on the mission committee, and I could imagine John could echo as much as I can, being a full-time missionary, that we as a church, we don't do missions. We send our money to the cooperative program and say, hey, missionaries, do our work for us. We don't reach Webb City. We don't reach our state, our nation, to the ends of the earth. So I'd say by 2020, a great strategy is to have something in play, not meaning that we have to do one every year, but somehow there would be a strategy in which we are reaching Webb City, we are reaching our nation, and we are going to the ends of the earth to evangelize and to make disciples, the mission that God has given us. Third thing that I would like to say is that if we were to do this, I would love to see 20 active small groups. Once again, small groups of Sunday school classes, it's all the same thing to me. Maybe it's not a Sunday school class. Maybe we have a lot of people in this church that can't come on Sunday morning. I know 6 right now that can't make Sunday morning because of their work schedule. But the reason that we baptize and 40% of those retain, 40 of them become us and 60% leave, is because we're not discipling. It's because we're dunking them under water and we're saying, have a great year. Hey, just join us. It's going to be fun. There has to be a goal. There has to be a plan. We've got to start painting in that boat, that picture of the boat, and add colors. How are we going to do this? It means we're going to have to educate. We're going to have to train teachers. We're going to have to do things. We're like, oh, that's kind of easy. We could, 20. Oh, okay. Reality is right now we have about 14. That's only adding 6 in 3 years. Oh, that's easy. But the reality was that this year alone, we took away 4 small groups because we had to combine our kids because we had no teachers. We had to lose an adult small group because we had no teachers, and those adults came down to teach some of our kids. We have to be willing as disciples, as saved people, to be able to care not only for the next generation, but sometimes even our own generation. We have to be able to train teachers and move them forward. In Acts chapter 20, in Acts chapter 2, verse 40, it says this: they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, the breaking bread, and prayer. Verse 46, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. See, when the church started in Acts, after Jesus left and the Christians were standing around, what did they do? They got in small groups. They got in family groups. People that could get together in small groups that could live life together. And what did they do? They focused on Scripture. They focused on prayer. They focused on helping people. And they focused on what Jesus did. And that's why they did the Lord's Supper. That's what we need to do. We've got to actively seek out to be able to grow and to mature teachers within our church to build other groups that people inside of our church can go to. Some of you right now might be sitting in a class from 60 to 80-year-old, but you're 40. Why? Because you might not fill a group there for the late 40s, early 50s. We need that class. Boom. Hey, maybe there's a class now. I know Martin told me the other day, we're going to have to start knocking out walls for him because he's got 40 people in his Sunday school class. That could easily be 2 or 3 classes. But who's going to teach that? Who's going to be able to give that small group element of people that go together and have meals and to do life with each other? That's what we need help with. That's what we need to do. Number 4, we need a complete generational ministry. And most people would say, isn't that what a church is? No, that's not what a church is. A complete generational ministry. And by what this means is vision, I would say by 2020, we need to have in place strategic, planned, effective ministries for all ages. And, I'll even add this, staffing for all ages. I believe that God is going to grow this church. I believe God has something great and to be able to move in First Baptist. And as you grow, 1 or 2 people cannot effectively minister to hundreds and hundreds of people. And that's why we have things like student pastors, like I am now. I come on because why? Because I'm more in tune and touched with the students and their parents. But at this church, it also kind of leads me to be with their little brothers and sisters and to plan other things for the kids. But if we could strategically have ministries and discipling and teaching for kids, for students, for adults, and for senior adults, wouldn't that just be great? Wouldn't that just grow more? I myself, this is so funny. I don't know if it's because we're so close to Branson. I told a lot of you guys this. Every church I've ever been at, I've always had a seniors ministry. And literally, it seemed like every week they were on a bus going to Branson or Gatlinburg. I don't know what it is. Now I'm at Branson. I understand when you live close, you don't want to go there. But this is where I've come from. There's always been that. And I know, probably just like the most of you, some of you want to meet more than just once a month at a banquet, at a Young at Heart's banquet. That there's times and places in your life that you need help. That you need somebody who knows you and knows your skill set and knows everything that you're going through to be able to help you walk through life. The same as our children's ministry, the same as our students, and the same as the young marrieds. Now, I can help in the kids, and I can help in the students, and I can even help at the young marrieds. I am semi-one. But when it comes to senior adults, I've helped minister. But the reality is, guys, I don't know what feeling 70 feels like. I know what being 70 pounds overweight feels like, but I don't know what 70 feels like. You know, I don't know those types of things. And so that's something that right now Ron kind of fills in with. But I would love to be able to see a dedicated person and ministry and strategic plan to help move in all of those. And then the last one, number 5. Maybe you guys would never see this one coming from me. 2020, I'd love to see an unprecedented generosity. Guys, I'm not talking about money. It's about everything. It's simply about everything. In Mark chapter 12, verse 41 through 44, it says this: Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but the poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more in the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." In 2020, could this be a church of unprecedented generosity? Not just money, of time, talents, gifts, abilities. In 2020, I hope that if I'm your pastor or somebody else is your pastor, they don't have to take a sermon on a Sunday to beg for 2 Sunday school teachers for kids. I hope there's a surplus. I hope there's people saying, you know what, I have the gift and I have the ability, and I know there's not an opening, but pastor, when there is an opening, you call me first. I can't wait to be able to pour into the lives of kids. Hey, you know what? I'm not really good at much, but man, I can bake cookies. And if you ever need cookies, pastor, you call me, and I'll bake you cookies, and I'll have them at church that day. Whatever that it is in your time and your talents and your gifts and your abilities, and yes, even your money, but the reality is when it comes down to it, Are we going to be a church that says, God, you've given everything to us. Everything is yours, and you gave it to us. But we trust you enough just to give you back a little bit more. We trust you enough to give you a little bit of our time and our talents and our gifts and our money because I want to see your mission completed. I want to see Webb City to be discipled. Like I said at the very beginning, I wanted you guys to hear this from me. Because I understand that I'm goofy and I'm silly and I have spiky hair and sometimes I don't tuck in my shirt. But the reality is this. God's given this church a mission to go and make disciples. And no matter who you call in as your pastor, make sure that they have a vision, they have a goal, and they're in tune not only with God and this church, but with you so they can help lead us to make disciples of First Baptist Webb City. Father, we love you. We thank you so much. Father, today is a day of this church that is so important. It is so important. It's such a different day of when it comes down to the point of saying we're supposed to realize and we're supposed to really just know this guy and to appoint a man that will help us to disciple Webb City, Missouri, this nation, and the world. Father, we're all mortal. We all have sins. None of us are perfect. But Father, today, just like the first song we sung, Father, to trust and obey, no matter what, no matter who, but we will trust your grace, we will trust your mercy, and we will obey it. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time. We thank you for this organization that we call the church, that you set up from the beginning of time for a group of people to come together to carry out your mission. Father, help us to be mission focused. Help us to put our eyes upon you and the lost of Webb City and to never look away and to keep moving and to keep trying until every last person is discipled. Father, we love you and we thank you so much. In your name, amen.